Who could have believed 3 years ago that the Trump administration would have recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, moved the U.S. embassy there, recognized Israel's annexation of the Golan Heights, and declared that West Bank settlements are not necessarily illegal, all in just 3 years? Where will all this lead? We'll talk about it on today's edition of End of the Age. Well, it was a wonderful time in Israel, but it's also so good to be back home with all of you. And we had a wonderful trip to Israel. Such tremendous people with us there. We made many new friends. It was just an unprecedented time. And if you've never got to go with us yet, make plans to go. You know, some things you'll never do unless you just plan it. And that's what you've got to do with these trips to Israel. But you'll never regret it. The comment that I received the most on this trip was, I got so much more than I expected. I had one person say after they were there 3 days, I've already got my money's worth. Well, of course, we were there a lot more than 3 days. The total trip was 12 days. But what a great time it was. We enjoyed it so much, especially enjoyed all the people that were with us so much. Oh, by the way, let me just mention to you, don't forget the new series, Revelation, the Unveiling of Jesus Christ. Videos and book together. Greatest Christmas gift you could ever give. And right now is the time to be thinking about those things. So don't forget it. Well, let's swing right into what we're going to talk about today, because the U.S. policy has shifted dramatically while I was out of town. While I was in Israel, the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, made the announcement that the United States would no longer consider the settlements as illegal. Now, what happens is this leaves the Obama legacy in the dust. Washington's move is a constructive step towards Israel ahead of the Trump administration's introduction of the long-awaited deal of the century. This article comes from Israel Hayom newspaper, which Hayom is the word for today, Israel Today, like we have a USA Today newspaper. They have Israel Today. The title of the article, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's announcement Monday that Israel's settlement enterprise in Judea and Samaria is not inconsistent with international law, which stepped away from decades of White House policy. It was also another step in the Trump administration's efforts to leave the legacy of President Barack Obama in the past. The American recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital and President Trump's decision to recognize Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights are also staples on this new policy, which turned away from the thinking and action patterns of former presidents, the likes of President Obama and Jimmy Carter. Nearly 4 decades after Carter, it was Obama who produced another resounding expression of this policy when he refrained from exercising the U.S. veto to strike down UN Security Council Resolution 2334, which defined the settlements as legally invalid. Now, I want to stop here just a moment, because if you're a longtime listener to this program, you know back on December the 23rd of 2016, we were pounding the table because President Obama is now actually out of power, but not quite. Already, Hillary's lost the election, Donald Trump has been elected, and yet Obama has a 2-month period where he's supposed to be a lame duck. But he sends the word out to the world community, if you all want to pass something against Israel, I'm all for it. And we will not be vetoing it. Now, the United States of America has many times stood between Israel and the international community, which is just itching to get back at Israel. Well, President Obama sent out the message, we will not be vetoing your resolution. So they passed it, Resolution 2334, which stated that Israel's presence in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and here was the wording, was a flagrant violation of international law. My blood ran cold when I read that resolution. Sure enough, our representative at the UN, our ambassador, just sit there on her hands because she had been ordered by Barack Obama, don't veto this, let it pass. Consequently, international law now says that Israel's presence in the West Bank, the Judea-Samaria area, and in East Jerusalem is a flagrant violation of international law, thus creating the premise for the UN to someday invade Israel to enforce that law. The Bible calls it the Battle of Armageddon. We'll be right back.
We've seen Bible prophecy fulfilled like never before. From the halls of the United Nations to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, Endtime Ministries continues to reveal the Bible prophecy in the news headlines around the world every day. Whether it's through our broadcast or online at our Jerusalem Prophecy College, your gifts enable us to put vital materials in the hands of those who need it most. Because of you, we continue to replace fear with faith in the hearts of Christians around the world. We will continue to see prophecy come to pass at an even swifter pace. We need your support. Your donation of any amount enables us to continue to broadcast and be a voice in the ever-growing censored media. To become a partner or give a one-time gift, visit endtime.com or call 1-800-END-TIME right now. That's 800-363-8463. Go online now. Visit endtime.com.
Does the book of Revelation frighten you? Do its symbols confuse you? For centuries, the book of Revelation has been misunderstood and misinterpreted. In Revelation, the unveiling of Jesus Christ, Volume 1, Irvin Baxter unlocks the mystery of the book of Revelation with in-depth analysis and commentary like you've never heard before. This 10-part definitive DVD series and 268-page comprehensive commentary book covers the first 12 chapters of the book of Revelation, featuring on-location photography, classic artwork, and symbolic illustrations. You'll walk away with complete understanding and peace about the events happening during the final years on Earth. These comprehensive study tools, available for $299, will deepen your biblical understanding as you dig into the original intent of the book, answering the mysterious prophecies and symbols of the book of Revelation. Don't miss this special offer. Call now, 1-800-END-TIME, or go to endtime.com to order. Call or go online now to get this comprehensive Bible study.
Well, President Obama's action was the final tier of a long line of presidential statements that defined, and as we continue on here, the settlements as illegitimate. This not only takes Obama right back to the Carter, but also ignored the basic American stance formulated in the wake of the Six-Day War, which defined the settlements as a political issue that could impede the peace process in terms of political negotiation, but not as a legal issue expected to complicate the negotiations. Okay, now let's pause. Let's make sure we bring it all together here. So way back in the days of Jimmy Carter, he vowed that the entire area, the West Bank area, biblically known as Judea and Samaria, should be given to the Palestinians and that East Jerusalem should be their capital. However, Ronald Reagan did not hold that stance and did not call the settlements necessarily illegal. Furthermore, President George W. Bush actually stated and gave a letter to Ariel Sharon stating that the borders, the 1967 borders, were not necessarily where the borders would end up after negotiations. He sent this letter to Ariel Sharon on April the 14th of 2004, and he acknowledged the new demographic reality created in the territories after 67. Now, why was this so important? Because the prior to 67 boundaries left Israel 9 miles wide at the waist. Now, with the ever-increasing sophistication of military weapons, can you imagine trying to defend a country 9 miles wide in this day of rockets, let alone jet airplanes and all the rest? So consequently, Ariel Sharon said to George W. Bush, look, these are suicide borders. We're not going to be able to agree to these borders in any final solution. And George W. Bush agreed with them and sent him a letter to actually reaffirm this. Now, Barack Obama, he didn't care about that letter. He just rode right over the top of it and contradicted it and then enshrined it in international law by pushing for a resolution, Resolution 2334, which then passed, and only the United States abstained, but we did not vote no. Now, we have absolute veto power at the UN Security Council, but we chose not to use that veto power, but rather to let this pass. Well, what a fatal flaw that was. I call that resolution the Armageddon resolution because right now, the United Nations could point to that resolution and say, look, we passed it by a vote in the UN Security Council that it's illegal, it's a flagrant violation of international law for Israel to be there. They could say that. Okay, but President Trump is now reversing all of those realities. By doing the things he's doing, he is undoing the legacy of Barack Obama, and we should all be very thankful that that is in fact happening. Okay, now, this reality, he implied, ruled out the possibility that Israel would be required within the framework of the Israeli-Palestinian peace deal to execute a full withdrawal to the 1967 lines. Against this backdrop, Pompeo's declaration a week ago today can be seen not only as following in the footsteps of Reagan and Bush, but more explicitly as an expression of the emphasis on the Trump administration placed on the historical dimension of the special U.S.-Israel relationship. Now, we're talking about big changes here. We're talking about moving the embassy to Jerusalem. We're talking about recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital. We're talking about recognizing the Golan Heights, which Israel annexed way back when, but nobody had ever recognized it. And it appeared the whole world was against it. And now to say that the settlements out there in Judea and Samaria are not necessarily illegal when the whole world community was shouting, everybody agrees that this is illegal, that you're out here. Well, no more, because the world's greatest superpower and the world's wealthiest nation has now said, no, that's not true. We've looked it over now. Before we go on here, let's pause just a moment. How can this change take place? Well, the truth of the matter is, Israel did not occupy this from anybody. Remember the story? 1917, it was under Turkey's domination. Turkey was defeated as the head of the Ottoman Empire and renounced its claim over all of those territories. Then it was placed under the British supervision called the British Mandate until 1948. When Britain pulled out, the Arabs came in and tried to destroy the Jewish nation before it could even catch its first breath. The Jewish nation, by the way, that the UN had voted into existence. but they didn't care about the UN. They launched wars against it anyway. And when the ceasefire was declared in 1949, Jordan, that had come across the Jordan River to try to destroy Israel, stayed and illegally occupied Judea, Samaria, known as the West Bank, from 1949 until 1967. Now that's who held that territory, Jordan, an illegal occupier. Then that same illegal occupier attacked Israel in 1967. Israel counterattacked, drove them out of the West Bank, back across the Jordan River, from whence they had come 19 years before that. And then the international community says, you're an illegal occupier. No, the truth of the matter is, the Balfour Declaration, which was issued by the British government while they controlled this territory, stated that His Majesty's government looks with favor on establishing the nation of Israel as a state after 2,000 years of exile. Now the British government says, we are favorable towards the reestablishment of the nation of Israel in its own land. And there's no doubt whose land it is. It's called Judea, Samaria. Read your Bible. Of course, I mean, you're talking about Bethlehem, Jericho. We all know that these are Israeli territory for the last 3,000 years, except for the time that Israel was in exile. So when you look at all this thing, when the international community and the media tries to harp continually, Israel is the illegal occupier, and you look and say they're illegally occupying Judea? Isn't that where they got the word Jew from? How could Jews be illegal in Judea? Well, nobody can answer that question, except they just scream over and over again. And if you repeat a lie long enough and loud enough, eventually some people begin to believe it. But Donald Trump does not believe it. They did a 1-year search, a research on this issue. Is Israel's presence in the settlements illegal? And they came to the conclusion that it simply was not true on the very basis of the things I just now stated to you. So anyway, that's where we are. And President Trump has the backbone and is fearless and is willing to do what is right, which he did. He simply aligned U.S. policy with the Bible. Now that's a shock. Okay. Let's get back to our article. It also puts a welcome end to the attempts by Carter and Obama to lend the issue of Israeli settlements in Judea and Samaria a dimension pertaining to international law. Now, let's talk about this international law thing. Oh, international law says Israel cannot be there. What's international law? Are we talking about world government here? Are we living under world government now? Is there a law above Israel? Is there a law above the United States of America that we must bend our national laws to obey this mysterious international law? Now, there's a lot of people that really want there to be a world government, but guess what? It does not yet exist. The United States should not recognize it. Israel should not recognize it, but most of the world does recognize it, and they refer to it continually as international law. Frightening to me, because I know that we have a Declaration of Independence, not a Declaration of Interdependence. Okay. The article goes on to say, it also stands to reason that it is no coincidence that Pompeo's statement came a few days after the European Union's top court ordered the mandatory labeling of goods produced beyond the green line as it seeks to staunch denial of any attempt to tackle this complex issue with legal instruments. Now, what's going on here? The highest court in the European Union made a ruling that all products produced in Judea, Samaria, in the West Bank, in these settlements, had to have a special label on it so people could boycott it. Cannot say made in Israel. That's what they ruled. Well, they were saying these settlements are illegal under international law. But the very same week that the highest court of the European Union made this statement, Mike Pompeo made the declaration that the settlements are not illegal, directly fly in the face of what the European Union, by the way, the godless European Union, the European Union that will soon be the power base of the Antichrist himself. Now let's tell it like it is. America, we do not want to in any way harmonize our policies with the policies of Europe, because Europe is headed straight toward the arms of the Antichrist himself and the time period called the Great Tribulation. Okay. But above all, Washington's move can be seen as a constructive step towards Israel, hoping that on the basis of this solid friendship and demonstration of support over core issues, the Trump administration will be able to launch its deal of the century and expect that its Israeli partner will pull its weight in promoting it, all pending the establishment of a new government in Israel. Okay, let's pause. This is critical and important stuff here, because we know the Bible prophesies a peace deal is coming. And this peace deal, when it's established, will mark the beginning of the final 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus Christ to this earth. Well, Trump's deal of the century looks like it's that peace agreement that's been prophesied for the last 2,500 years. It's one of the few prophecies we have with a timeline attached to it. When this is signed, the final 7 years to Armageddon and the physical return of Jesus to this earth will begin. So what we're dealing with here is Trump saying, okay, I'm doing all these things. Everything he's doing, I promise you, is in line with his peace plan, which he completed back in January of 2019. But he's been sitting on it because Netanyahu said, we're in the middle of election. You throw that right in the middle of the election, it's going to be a free-for-all. It's going to be a bombshell. Don't do it until I get this government put together. Well, Netanyahu hasn't been able to put a government together. They had the elections April the 9th. Ended up no government. They had to declare new elections. New elections September the 17th. Again, they've not been able to put together a government. And Trump's all the time sitting there with this peace plan that he worked so carefully on, ready to lay it on the table. But because there's no government to negotiate with in Israel right now, it has not been done. Now, I want to ask you this, ladies and gentlemen. Do you get the feeling like I do? But with all this maneuvering in Israel, them not being able to put together a government, do you get the feeling that God's in the background manipulating the whole thing? That he is arranging the timing just like he wants it, and he's going to put in there the ruler that will fulfill his will, even if it is a negative will, because it's not going to be God's will for this peace deal to be struck. It's not God's will, but it's going to happen. You know, a lot of things in the Bible happened that were not God's will, that God told them, do not do that. He told Israel, don't have a king, but they were determined to do what they wanted to do. So there are many things that are even going to happen in the very near future, including this peace deal, that will be against God's will. But nevertheless, it's going to happen, because sometimes when people ask for things against God's will, he'll send an evil ruler to allow them to have the things they're asking for, since they are rebelling against his will. All right. Legal expert in Israel says that a U.S. policy shift on settlements does not close the door on peace decisions, means that negotiations will no longer begin from the premise, watch this close, the negotiations, peace negotiations, whenever they do resume, will no longer begin from the premise that Israel has no claim to this land or stole it from the Palestinians. That false legal theory, as I've already explained, only served to harden Palestinian positions and make successful negotiations impossible, said jurist Eugene Kontorovich. Now, That's from the Israel Hayom newspaper. Now, experts weighed in on the U.S. State Department's announcement on Monday that the United States is softening its stance on Jewish settlements in Judea and Samaria. This is a reversal of the 1978 State Department legal opinion known as the Hansel Memorandum that such neighborhoods are inconsistent with international law. Eugene Kontorovich, director of the Center for International Law in the Middle East at George Mason University's Antonin Scalia School of Law, labeled Monday's announcement as a major development in U.S.-Israeli relations, in that Hansel Memorandum was legally inaccurate and long outdated. So they've been living with this memorandum since 1978, and now this new jurist comes along and says, that's outdated. It was incorrect from the beginning. The international law arguments against settlements were devised solely for the case of Israel and have not been applied in any other situation. In other words, Russia can take Crimea. What's being done about it? Are there? Not much, really. Same thing was true with 50 other places around the world. But when Israel does it, they hone right in on Israel. The U.S. now correctly takes the position that Israel is not an occupying power in the West Bank, and Jews living in Judea and Samaria is not a war crime. This does not close the door to a two-state solution, he continued. It does mean the negotiations about such a solution will no longer begin from the premise that Israel has no claim to this land or stole it from the Palestinians. That false legal theory only served to harden Palestinian positions and make successful negotiations impossible. It's gone. Abbas can no longer say, we must have East Jerusalem as our capital, and we must have everything on the West Bank. Can't do it anymore. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you can stay with us the next half hour. You're listening to End of the Age. 1-800-Endtime is the number to call.
Move Mountains with Irvin Baxter. This book by Irvin's grandson provides 30 days of devotion that will enhance your relationship with God and others. Authentic illustrations from early morning devotions at Endtime will help you find your purpose and eliminate fears. Commit to taking this 30-day journey and experience real life change. Get your book for only $14.99. Call 1-800-363-8463 or go to endtime.com/move.
If ever people needed to hear the unvarnished truth, it is now. There are some subjects that are not politically correct to talk about, but they're urgent. That's why I'm grateful for Endtime magazine. If you're not a subscriber, you're missing information that will impact your life. Endtime has a bi-monthly magazine that explains how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. You can get a 2-year subscription for only $29. You can also get a bulk subscription and pass them out to your church. We have gotten reports that Endtime magazine has caused spiritual awakenings in churches when they see the prophecies being fulfilled right now. You can start your own ministry and leave them in doctors' offices, libraries, laundromats. You never know if you might be responsible for saving someone who is searching for the unvarnished truth. That's what the magazine has done in many lives. Call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 and get your subscription today.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archive button.
We will be taking your calls in this segment of the program. However, let's finish what we're on here because it's so critical. It's so important. Now, this move to recognize the settlements as not illegal by the U.S. comes a week after the United States criticized the European Court of Justice to require products coming from Judea and Samaria, Eastern Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights not to be labeled Made in Israel. Specifically, it noted the Sagat winery case. The European Union representative said that Brussels' policy on Israeli settlements remains the same. All settlement activity is illegal under international law, and it erodes the viability of the two-state solution and the prospects for lasting peace. Now, let me pause a moment to say, all right, they've been negotiating on the basis of this two-state solution and the settlement's been illegal for 70 years. How much peace have they gotten accomplished? None. So why is this such a sacred cow? Perhaps somebody needs to say, I think we're starting from the wrong premise because we're not getting anywhere at all. Okay. Now, last week, the European Court of Justice shamefully mandated a discriminatory labeling regime exclusively for Jewish goods from disputed Israeli territories, said Brooke Goldstein, executive director of the Lawfare Project, in a statement. By weaponizing consumer protection laws in pursuit of an anti-Israel political agenda, the EU made its position clear. It required American leadership to stand up for what's right. Today, the United States recognized Jews' right to live in our historic homeland. Now, this was published 1 week ago. The contrast could not be more clear, and the timing cannot be coincidental. We're thrilled to see the United States recognize reality and clearly articulate its commitment to justice and equality under the law. Oh, by the way, articles are appearing in Israel. The world finally no longer claims the Bible is illegal because they know what the Bible says about these settlements. The Bible tells Israel, this is your land that I gave to your fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And now then these articles are appearing in the Jewish press. World community no longer says that Bible is illegal. Very interesting. Continuing on, for too long, the Palestinian leadership has looked to disengage from the peace process in the hopes that someone else will make all of their wishes come true. The belief that wars, conflicts of attrition, the internationalization of the conflict, the boycott, divest, and sanctions movement, the rise in anti-Semitism on the left in Europe and in the U.S., and the creation of mythologies, all could be counted on to deliver Israel to the Palestinians without Palestinians needing to negotiate or compromise directly with Israel, he said. Now, that's what's been going on. The Palestinians say, if we just wait long enough, the international community's going to do all of our work for us. And they have been waiting, and they have been waiting, and the peace process is going no place. Well, the article continued, I am also concerned that ignoring the international consensus on settlements will isolate not only Israel from the international community, but isolate the U.S. as well. Okay, stop right there. Did you hear what he said? I'm afraid that what's happening now and the U.S. stating that these settlements are not illegal is going to isolate the United States and Israel from the world community. Do you know that's prophesied in your Bible? In Revelation chapter 12 and chapter 13, it depicts the one world government. In the world government in chapter 13, there's no eagle's wings there, even though the eagle's wings were used to symbolize America back in Daniel 7. But when you move to the New Testament, the eagle's wings are left out of the world government structure. The beast with the body of the leopard, Germany, the feet of the bear, Russia, the mouth of the lion, Great Britain. No eagle's wings. Where do we find the eagle then in the book of Revelation? One chapter prior. There a description is being given of Satan during the final 3.5 years called the Great Tribulation, coming down against Israel to try to destroy her. But verse 14 of chapter 12 of Revelation says, but there will be given to the woman Israel, the woman with the 12 stars around her head, there will be given to the woman Israel 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into her place where she's nourished from the face of the serpent for times and a half a time. What's all that mean? The one world government of the Antichrist is depicted in Revelation 13, 1 through 2. No eagle's wings, no Israel. Revelation 12, verse 13 and 14, you've got Israel and the eagle's wings together, fighting against the Antichrist and his one world government. So in this article, they said, oh, we're afraid that Israel and the United States is going to be isolated from the world community. Well, they are going to be, but I'm not afraid. I'm happy. I don't want us to be a part of the one world government system of the Antichrist. Right now, we are watching the U.S. and Israel being isolated from the world as a whole. And a lot of people, they just are so aghast at that. This is so terrible. We're going to be out here all by ourselves. Well, we're not going to be totally by ourselves. You know, there's this God factor you got to bring into play, because God said to Abraham, those that bless you, I'm going to bless them, and those that curse you, I'm going to curse them. Isn't it astounding? While people are doing everything in their power to bring Donald Trump down, day after day, the stock market is just busting the daylights out of the ceiling. New records being set all the time. The economy is booming. African American unemployment at its lowest ever. Hispanic unemployment at its lowest ever. Women's unemployment at its lowest ever. What's going on here? While the enemies of Donald Trump's policies are fighting against him with all their might, it's like he just keeps walking right straight through them and they can't touch him. Could that have anything to do with how good he's been to Israel? You know, we had quite a good experience in our trip this last week. Toward the last few days, I told our guide specifically I wanted to go out and see the new community that was being established. It's named Trump Heights. Well, we did. Big, huge sign, beautiful sign. Trump Heights. They're doing that to honor President Trump. It's out there in the Golan Heights because he recognized the Golan Heights as legitimate Israeli territory. If you understand the topography of the land, Israel does not need to give that up, because before they captured that in the 67 war, the Syrians were continually shelling the settlements down below, the communities down below. Israel can't go back to those days. Syria had to pay a price for their aggressive policy against Israel. They lost that land they were using to shell the Israeli communities down below. They don't need to give it up. And President Trump knows that. Consequently, they put up this big sign. You're probably going to be seeing a picture of that in the next Endtime magazine. If you're not a subscriber to Endtime, well, it'd be worth it just to get that picture. So you might call 1-800-ENDTIME and get your own subscription to the Endtime magazine, the most widely circulated prophecy magazine in the world. I mean, if you're going to subscribe to one magazine, only one, make it Endtime magazine. After all, this is the Endtime, right? It's the one magazine you should not be without. You may say, I don't subscribe to any magazines. I do everything electronically. You can subscribe to Endtime magazine electronically. Just pick up the phone and call 1-800-ENDTIME. Let them know you want to subscribe. They'll help you with all the details. Wow. Okay. Well, I'm ready to come to the phones. If our technology people will switch over for me. I don't know whether you've been dialing yet or not, but to be on the phone with me, 877-END-TIME, 877-363-8463. And I want to hear from you, because I've been laying so much out here, and there may be some of you that disagree with me. I welcome your calls. We need to talk about it, because you know, after you listen to the news so long, it can warp your opinion. It can cause you no longer to know what the truth is. That's the reason that we need to go back to the Bible, the sole arbiter of truth. I mean, I'm watching right now Mr. Buttigieg, who supposedly is ahead in the Democratic primary that will be held in Iowa not too long from now. And when I think of Mr. Buttigieg, he's got a man that he calls his husband. I guess he's the wife. Maybe Buttigieg is going to be the first female president. I mean, that's the way they're, if you've lost your mind, you can believe that. You look at a man and say, that's a woman. Isn't it crazy how insane we have gone? I mean, all you got to do is say, hey, I'm a woman, and you head for the women's restroom. But just make sure there's not a weightlifter in there or something, because I saw where a 20-some-year-old boy went into a home, broke into a home recently, and there was an 82-year-old woman there, but she happened to be a world-class weightlifter, and she beat the tar out of that 20-some-year-old guy. So be careful what you ask for. You may get it. Well, anyway, all right, we're going to get to the phones right now, and I want to go first of all to Virginia. Anna's calling from Virginia. Well, no, that's not true. David's calling from Virginia. Hello, Dave. What's on your mind?
Hey, Pastor. It's an honor and a privilege to talk to the president of the Jerusalem Prophecy College. Just a privilege. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you.
And I was just listening to Rabbi Jonathan Kahn. He's a Messianic rabbi in New Jersey. And he said that when Netanyahu came to Florida for like a Christian and Jews conference, that there was a guy named Malari that had a word for him and said that Netanyahu, you're going to be the prime minister when they build the third temple. So I just wonder if you heard anything of that or what you think about that.
Well, I did not hear that. That's interesting. We'll see whether the guy's a false prophet or not, because Netanyahu right now doesn't seem to be able to put together a government. It looks like they're headed toward another round of elections. We're in that 21-day period when anybody that can get 61 signatures to support them for prime minister, that person's the new prime minister. It doesn't have to be Netanyahu. It doesn't have to be Gantz. It can be anyone. The problem is nobody can do it. Well, so it looks like, I think there may be 19 days left in this 21-day period. If Netanyahu can pull a rabbit out of the hat and put a government together, then that could well be true. Because I do expect, as soon as they get their next government together, I do expect President Trump to put his peace plan on the table. And if somehow, some way, that peace plan can become the basis for a permanent peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians, then Netanyahu, I mean, once they make that deal, the temple will be built in the next 3.5 years. So we are living in incredibly interesting territory right now. So if this man prophesied that Netanyahu would be prime minister when the third temple's built, well, I guess we're getting ready to see whether that's going to be true or not. But I can guarantee you one thing. There's going to be a peace agreement, and there is going to be a third temple, no matter who is prime minister.
Does the book of Revelation frighten you? Do its symbols confuse you? For centuries, the book of Revelation has been misunderstood and misinterpreted. In Revelation, the unveiling of Jesus Christ, Volume 1, Irvin Baxter unlocks the mystery of the book of Revelation with in-depth analysis and commentary like you've never heard before. This 10-part definitive DVD series and 268-page comprehensive commentary book covers the first 12 chapters of the book of Revelation, featuring on-location photography, classic artwork, and symbolic illustrations. You'll walk away with complete understanding and peace about the events happening during the final years on Earth. These comprehensive study tools, available for $299, will deepen your biblical understanding as you dig into the original intent of the book, answering the mysterious prophecies and symbols of the book of Revelation. Don't miss this special offer. Call now, 1-800-ENDTIME, or go to endtime.com to order. Call or go online now to get this comprehensive Bible study.
Well, let's get right back to the phones. Let's go now to Bethany, calling from Georgia. Hello, Bethany.
Yes, hello.
You're on the air.
My question was about the Kanye West movement, or I don't know what to call it. But I was wondering, do you think that's the great revival that's supposed to come to the land?
Well, I don't know a lot about it, Bethany. I do know that Kanye West claims that he has recently become a Christian. If he is a biblical Christian, if he really turns to a biblical form of Christianity, God can do anything. But right now, I would hesitate to crown that as the great revival that's coming. Nevertheless, anybody that turns anybody toward Jesus Christ, I'm glad for it. So that's the best I can say. Of course, you know, his wife is one of the Kardashians, Kim Kardashian, and she's been a very immodest, immoral person. I don't know whether she is moving toward Christianity like Kanye West, her husband, is or not. I suppose time will tell about that. But I wouldn't count on that being the great revival. But if it's toward Jesus Christ, I'm thankful for it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Bethany. We have a question, a man that does not want to be on the air, but he's calling from Canada, and he wants to know the phrase time, and half a time in Scripture. He is wondering if that shouldn't be 2.5 years, not 3.5 years. Well, here's the way you can know for sure. In Daniel 7, verse number 25, it talks about the Antichrist persecuting the saints for times, and half a time until the Ancient of Days comes. The exact same prophecy is in Revelation 13, verse 1 through 5. It talks about the world government, and it says that the beast will have power to continue 42 months. And then in verse 7 it says, and he will make war against the saints and overcome them. Okay, it specifically says in verse 5, 42 months, he's going to make war against the saints and overcome them. Now, 42 months and 3.5 years is the exact same time period. Time, and half a time is the length of the Great Tribulation. 42 months is the length of the Great Tribulation. Revelation chapter number 12, verse number 5 and 6 says that the dragon will make war against the woman for 1,260 days. That's 42 months. That's 3.5 years. Every reference to the Great Tribulation is either described as time, and half a time, or 42 months, or 3.5 years. It's all the same time period. So hope that helps. Let's go now to Brandon calling from Missouri. Hello, Brandon.
Hello, Brother Baxter. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing fine. What's on your mind?
Hey, I got a question. So I was watching a Arizona news for research on my conservative and Christian show, and I came across a video on YouTube of this news company. You've heard of Greta Thunberg, right?
I'm not sure that I have, but go ahead.
That little girl who's for globalism and the climate change movement.
Oh, yes, I have heard of that, yes.
Okay, so I heard them saying she's pushing for a new world order, and that's exactly what they said on the news, on that news station. And I was wondering, it got me wondering, what are kids going to be forced to make, be marked for the mark of the beast or what?
Well, Brandon, here's what we know for sure from the Bible. We know that the one world government of the Antichrist is described in Revelation 13, verse 1 and 2. A beast, body of the leopard, Germany, feet of the bear, Russia, mouth of the lion, Great Britain, 10 horns of the 10-horn kingdom, a 10-nation alliance out of Europe, no eagle's wings. The United States is the eagle. So we are not a part of the one world government. Then we are depicted one chapter earlier as defending Israel against the Antichrist and his one world government. So that paints a very clear picture that both America and Israel will not succumb to the Antichrist. Therefore, it's obvious.
She's from a different country, so I was wondering if it would apply to kids being there in the Endtime one world government.
Yeah, well, wherever the Antichrist is in power, then the mark of the beast will be implemented towards the latter part of his reign. And they're going to have to deal with it. So if there are true Christians wherever the Antichrist is in power, they will have to refuse the mark of the beast, because the Bible teaches that anybody that takes that mark will be forever judged. So if you're in an area where the mark of the beast will be in power, then you will either have to leave that area, move to somewhere else in the world where there's safety, or else you will have to live there and not obey, not bow the knee to the one world government and the Antichrist. So that's where it's going to be very
kids will have to do it, right?
Well, the Bible does not say exactly how that's going to deal. We know that children that are below the age of accountability will not be held responsible for God. For example, the children that were with Israel, when Israel was sentenced to wander in the wilderness for 40 years, all below the age of 20 were not held accountable for the decision of their parents. I do not know exactly how God is going to deal with that, but obviously a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old child is not going to be held responsible by God for doing this. They will not have the ability to make their own choices. Yeah. So there's a God in heaven who's infinitely just and infinitely fair. Yeah. I'm sure he will deal with those things properly.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot that they're using children to promote the climate change agreement for the Endtime one world government.
Well, they do that because they're pliable. They believe whatever you tell them. And consequently, people are moved by children. They have a soft spot in their heart for children. Consequently, the people who are promoting these things do use these children in a way that's shameful.
Yeah, I've noticed. I've covered it a lot in my show. Thanks for the help.
Okay, well, very good, Brandon. Nice to talk to you. Let's move now. Let's move to Diana calling from Illinois. Hello, Diana.
Oh, hello?
You're on the air. What's your question?
Oh, okay. When I want to know why you think that these things are going to happen at the end of time instead of in 70 A.D. when Titus invaded Jerusalem and all those things were destroyed. Okay, it seems like the prophecy was fulfilled then. And I'm not a preterist. I'm just saying that's what it seems like. And I just want to know why you think that that's going to happen. It hasn't happened yet.
Well, like you say, Diane, you say you're not a preterist. That is the preterist position, that the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 A.D. was the Battle of Armageddon, and that all these prophecies are past. Here's how you can prove conclusively that is not true. The Bible teaches about the Battle of Armageddon in Revelation chapter number 16, verse 12 through 16. It says the Euphrates River will be dried up to facilitate the invasion of Israel by the kings of the east. And they will come down, and he gathers them into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. So it's the kings of the east that will come against Jerusalem at Armageddon. Who came against Jerusalem in 70 A.D.? Was it the kings of the east? No. It was the Romans due west of Jerusalem. So it was not the kings of the east, so that was not Armageddon.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. I just wanted to know. I'm just trying to sort all of this out in my mind as to, what that was that happened in 70 A.D. And was that part of the prophecy that Jesus was talking about? Because he did say, this generation shall not pass away. And I figured he was talking to the people that were sitting right there.
Okay, well, first of all, Jesus did prophesy about that destruction. He said to his disciples, not one stone shall be left upon another. It shall all come down. That happened in 70 A.D. Jesus made that statement in Matthew chapter 24, verse 1 through 4. So that was prophesied by Jesus. That was fulfilled, but it was not the Battle of Armageddon, because there are so many prophecies that must be fulfilled before Armageddon. For example, a war that kills 1/3 of mankind is prophesied in Revelation 9, verse 13 through 16. That's never happened. There's going to be a time when every person will have to have a mark or a number without which they cannot buy or sell. That has never happened. and you can just list them on and on and on, all the prophecies that were not fulfilled before 70 AD that must be fulfilled before the Battle of Armageddon. So it's very simple to prove that the Battle of Armageddon has not occurred yet.
Okay.
Now, one more thing you had mentioned where Jesus said, this generation shall not pass until all things be fulfilled. The question is, what generation? Jesus described the generation. He said to the disciples, when you see the trees putting forth their buds, you know something. Summer is nigh. Then he said, likewise, when you see all these things coming to pass, then know that the generation that sees these things shall not pass until everything is fulfilled. Jesus had told them the signs of his second coming. He said there will be wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes in different places. And then he said there will be an event called the abomination of desolation, when the Antichrist will sit in the temple of God claiming to be God. That has not happened yet. So that is one of the things, the generation that sees that happen, Jesus said that generation shall not pass until all things be fulfilled. He was not saying to the disciples living then, your generation will not pass. He says, learn this parable. You see the trees budding, you know summer's nigh. Likewise, when you see all these things, then know the generation that sees these things shall not come to pass until all things be fulfilled. That's what Jesus meant by what he said.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Okay. Well, thank you for calling, Diane. Appreciate it very much. Let's go to Wendy from Pennsylvania. Hello, Wendy.
Yes, hello.
What's on your mind today, Wendy?
Okay, so first of all, thank you so much for your ministry. I've watched you since April of last year. I used to be a pre-tribber, and now I'm not.
Okay.
But I do have a question. I know you teach that the falling away happened in 90 A.D. to 180 A.D. That is mentioned in 2 Thessalonians 2:3. But how, I don't understand the scripture in Matthew 7:13, enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction. And those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. And you talk about a great revival, and I don't see how. I mean, I understand being born again. I am born again, and the reality of your sin before a holy and righteous God is quite earth-shaking experience. So I'll take that answer off the air. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Wendy. All those are legitimate questions. We're almost out of time. Real quick. The Great Falling Away, the Dark Ages, 500 A.D. to 1500 A.D., I think that was the Great Falling Away. But that does not mean there won't be a falling away at the end. We're watching it right now. I'm actually sorry, Wendy. I'm not going to have the time. I hope you'll call back tomorrow, because I've run out of time here. I cannot answer your question completely. Thanks to all of you that have been listening today. We'll see you again tomorrow.
This has been End of the Age, brought to you by the faithful partners of Endtime Ministries. If you're not currently a partner with Endtime Ministries, or if you would like more information, we invite you to call us at 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463, or visit us online at endtime.com.
Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our Facebook page.